think it was 2014 or 15, we coined this term called lumbersexual, and it's kind of like metrosexual, but like a lumberjack. And it was kind of this burgeoning thing, like in New York, there'd be these tattooed and bearded guys over flannel shirts. We profiled that and hit upon this like zeitgeist, and GQ and Oprah and all these places kind of picked it up. I don't know, 400 million views or something. It was just a ridiculous over the moon type.
When you're talking to these big brands, what are their big considerations?
Their ad can appear on CNN.com next to a story about terrorism, or it can be on Gear Junkie about a story of 10 great summer hikes.
Google has changed dramatically. AI has come into the fold. How have you guys adapted your approach?
Being a journalist, being an editorial person, having empathy for the reader at all stages.
How did you transition from journalist to media company?
It was flying an airplane, building it, essentially, whatever the analogy is. It was...
Yeah, how big this brand ended up getting before you sold it?
You know, we've been doing millions of dollars in revenue for probably 10 years.
Like, where are you at now, whether it's page views or revenue figures?
Yeah, I think we say 10 million readers a month. Over 2 years, we raised $40 million. We made 8 acquisitions, and we relaunched the company as All Gear Digital.
For the small publisher listening to this, some piece of insight that they wouldn't be able to get from running a small website.
There's industry standard playbooks. You got to get there, and then...
All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we are joined by Stephen Reginald. Stephen, welcome on board.
Hey, Jared, good to be here.
Great to have you. We are talking, we have a great story to outline. I'm sure some of the different brands and websites that you're going to mention as you're associated with are going to be familiar to some of the listeners. I know for me, when I saw some of the websites that you work with, I was excited because one of them is one I follow pretty closely. But I'm excited for today. But before we get into it and get to the details of our agenda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you've got a long backstory that we'll get into, but maybe just give us like 30 to 60 seconds to start us off.
Yeah, for sure. High level, I'm a writer and journalist by training, kind of cut my teeth at New York Times and the local paper here in Minneapolis where I'm based, the Star Tribune. And I always have been on this beat of kind of outdoor adventure, active lifestyle. And I built that into a media company called Gear Junkie. So the last 10 plus years, I've been focused on operating a media company. And then I sold that a couple years ago and was ported onto the staff to help build a bigger organization called All Gear Digital. So that's been my journey.
So you started off as a journalist, which I feel like I've interviewed a number of journalists over the years that have gone on to successful media careers. What was the moment? I mean, you were writing, I think I saw for the New York Times for a short period, or maybe a long period, just a period. You're writing for the New York Times, obviously your local paper there. Like, how did you transition from journalist to kind of website owner, content creator, media company? I know it's a broad question, but that's really, I'm curious how that transition happens.
I had a column that I wrote weekly in a newspaper, and then for the New York Times, I would do travel journalism and cover extreme sports, adventure sports. So over the course of a couple of years, I built both, a knowledge set, a kind of Rolodex of connections, and then a big audience of people that were following what I was doing. So all of that translated pretty well to launching a digital media company. And a lot of the best practices with journalism apply to the content site world, the media site world. So it was organic in that way, but also this was 10 plus years ago. There wasn't like a very, the digital playbook was much more Wild West. So we kind of invented as we flew the plane.
What was it about? Because I mean, when you started a column, how were you able to transition that into your own website? Like, how did the website versus what the newspaper or those sorts of things, did they own that, or did you get the rights for it?
Yeah, I kept the rights. I kind of was careful with that. So after a couple of years, I guess had, a couple hundred copywritten, ready to go, copy edited, ready to go columns that I could port onto the web. This was, 2006, 2008, a long time ago, and have the foundation for a blog, which is what we called it at the time, but essentially have a long tail immediately, and then add to that with sort of the daily churn of what it was to build a blog.
Maybe help people understand. I don't understand this, and I'm guessing people would be curious because I remember reading that you had that column syndicated in a bunch of newspapers around the country. Like, How does it work to own the column versus the newspaper owning it? Just give us a little insight into that.
Sure, I was essentially a contractor for the newspapers. You'd sign a whatever 6-month deal at some low amount of money because there is not a lot of money in the newspaper landscape. So it's an economies of scale thing. If I could get 15 papers across America to publish the column weekly, 15 times $50, whatever they paid me at the time, was eking out some kind of a living. So this was all pre kind of the digital wave. It's, people forget, but in even 2005, 2010, newspapers were still a legitimate source and, kind of quickly diminishing. So I saw that writing on the wall and pivoted to digital, 2010, and never looked back.
Today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
In this video, I will show you how we landed a placement on BBC and dozens of links in massive regional online publications such as Wales Online, Daily Post, and many more. This PR campaign was about the easiest place to pass your driving test for the first time in the UK. This is how we've done it. We simply went to DVLA website, found the latest car driving test data by test center, and downloaded the data in a CSV format. Once we had the data, all we had to do is to look at the number of total tests per test center, then look at the number of first time passes to calculate the percentage of people who passed their test for the first time. Once we had the percentage numbers, we created a press release with our findings. Then we went to Roxhill and found journalists who talk about driving tests, and also looked for journalists who write in regional publications in the UK. In total, we have found about 1,800 journalists and sent them our press release by email. Within less than a day, our story got picked up by BBC, Cornwall Live, Wales Online, and dozens of other publications in the UK, providing our client a tsunami of backlinks perfectly relevant to the audience of the client, who is a specialist in learner driver car insurance. I hope this video is helpful and it shows you how you can also build links with freely available data from official sources.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now. How were the first couple of years of starting GearJunkie.com? And those were the early days of website creation, really, and content creation, and really the idea of a content website was so brand new at that point.
It was kind of like I said, flying an airplane, building it as we flew, whatever the analogy is. It was trying things, move fast, break things, kind of those internet cliches, but that's what you do. You kind of lean into what's working and delete what's not, and then iterate and build. And I kind of love that. The signals are real time, always on. You have dashboards, and coming from the New York Times, for example, I had millions of readers, but it was sort of publishing into the void. Maybe you'd get a letter or a letter or an email to letter to the editor. That was a thing early in my career. I was kind of born into this world of after journalism school, where the zeitgeist of media was glossy magazines and daily newspapers, and obviously leaned into that, and then tried to just stay nimble. And as the digital wave came again, 2010, that's essentially where you try to stay nimble, try to stay on trend, where the audience was essentially.
In the early days of Gear Junkie, 2010 maybe, or in the subsequent years, like, how did the monetization play out? What were the channels of success? What did it look like to monetize back then? I'm guessing it's very different than it is now.
The revenue playbook was taken from kind of magazine type media companies, where you'd have a media kit and you'd interface with ad agencies and you'd sell campaigns. So that still exists. Obviously, there's all the automated programmatic networks and everything that the digital era brought, but we continue at Gear Junkie. I continue to work with these guys as an advisor. We continue to lean into sort of that tried and true model of RFPs and campaigns, CPM-based advertising deals, and presenting pitches. And that still exists in a subset of agencies and brands that want to build sort of big branding campaigns. So from the start, we just began networking, trying to get the name out there, going to trade shows, going to New York, meeting people. Again, kind of that playbook that was standard with the magazine media company world. And I learned that just through association with that world. Put that on top of the digital, essentially the digital product. And for many years, digital was kind of oh, that's cute, you're doing that thing over there. And such in this outdoor kind of adventure space, it's a little bit old school. People like to get their magazine, and our biggest competitor for the first few years were magazine ads in Backpacker, Outside, all these publications that were seeing millions of subscribers, and that's kind of where the media energy went. And that, that's shifted completely now, but some of those models still exist around, again, RFPs and campaign.
What were some of the most successful pieces of content historically on Gear Junkie, or maybe the ones that took off from the beginning? And I know that, for people who are listening, like I have the ability to look at your resume, and so you, in many ways, you really embodied what Gear Junkie stood for, because you were a very active outdoorist and enjoying all these things that Gear Junkie was talking about. But like, what kind of hit, or what took off, or what topics ended up kind of being the most successful in the first few years?
Yeah, a couple come to mind. We've had some kind of mega viral moments where crashed the servers and just kind of put us into a different kind of consciousness with Gear Junkie, and those can be game changers. So I think it was 2014 or 15. It sounds funny, but we coined this term called lumbersexual, and it's kind of like metrosexual, but like a lumberjack. And it was kind of this burgeoning thing, like in New York, there'd be these tattooed and bearded guys over flannel shirts, and they were like super hip, and they kind of took this outdoors ethos to their look and style. We profiled that and kind of hit upon this like zeitgeist, and GQ and Oprah and all these places kind of picked it up and syndicated the content. And we measured the impressions at like, I don't know, 400 million views or something. It was just a ridiculous over the moon type moment. And the cherry on top was our word lumbersexual, which we did not invent, but we coined, which I think means we made popular. It was nominated for Oxford Dictionary Word of the Year. Oh, and it kind of got like second place behind, at that time, which is hilarious, when beat us was a smiley face emoji, because that was kind of the new word then. But so that was a crazy few weeks, and it sort of elevated the Gear Junkie brand into a different strata, because all these marketers and brands, not to mention millions of readers, were then aware of the company. So that you can have those breakout moments. It's interesting.
I have a question about virality. I mean, it's a question I'm sure you've been asked before. It gets asked, but like, was there, using this analogy, in terms of the lumbersexual word choice and all that, like, was there purpose for you guys when you guys strategized around it? Was it like, hey, like, let's try to create some virality around something? Or was it just one of those things where someone published a piece of content and it just ended up catching, and that's just the way it goes sometimes?
Yeah, it was the latter. I mean, you can't engineer virality. And in fact, I remember looking at this piece, one of my freelance writers, who's a friend of mine, Tom Puzak, and he's just a bike friend. He's a smart guy, very observant. Like he knew this was a trend, and he kind of pushed me to publish this. And I was thinking, I don't know, man, like, it's kind of weird, but we went for it. So if you try to manufacture virality, I mean, it can work to an extent, because you kind of know the culture, you know your audience. You might have a scoop or something, but it's luck plays into it. Let's put it that way.
As you guys matured at Gear Junkie, what was, just to give people an idea, if you can, anything you can share in terms of numbers, in terms of whether it's, monthly traffic or some revenue numbers, or just to give you an idea how big this brand ended up getting before you kind of packaged it and sold it?
Yeah, totally. Millions of readers, I guess, would be the high level, and then millions in revenue. And that started with, the very first ad we sold was $500, and it was sad because they didn't even pay us for a year. So it was like, this does not start out great. And this was maybe 2007 or 8, just when we were getting going. And over the course of the next few years, began hiring people, scaling up, got a business partner, got professionalized, got an office, started going to agencies, presenting plans, started selling 5-figure deals and 6-figure deals. And then, recently it's been a few 7-figure deals. So these are direct sold campaigns to big advertisers like the North Face, Toyota, Red Bull, et cetera, kind of these big brands in our space that have money to spend on big branding campaigns because they want to get in front of millions of readers in kind of the contextual environment that is GearJunkie.com. So it was a slow build in a way, but we've been doing millions of dollars in revenue for probably 10 years. So maybe 2015 or 16, it started to take off.
I think most people listening are probably going to be mostly using what you kind of referenced, programmatic ads, like a third-party company that's going to handle all the advertising on their website for them and then pay them a percentage of those profits. Usually, 60, 70, 80% is what will go to the publisher. What are the big differences in direct media and working on those direct relationships? And where would someone start to consider moving away from a programmatic ad company and into something like that?
It's higher touch. So you need a staff of people that interfaces with agencies and brands to deliver campaigns. And then delivering the campaign can mean delivering a media campaign of banner ads to the tune of, potentially tens of millions of impressions. And then having an ad ops team that makes sure that they're viewable and the ads are serving and that site is functioning and it's a legitimate campaign. It's delivering what you sold. There's also other moving parts, like does it have custom content or videos? So it's way higher touch to direct sell, but it's way higher revenue, and it's you can kind of go for these bigger targets. So I certainly have friends and operators that do great with programmatic, and I think it's beautiful because they don't have a staff to manage. It's just code, it's plug and play. But you kind of need significant scale to make significant revenue with programmatic, where, Gear Junkie can get 3 to 5 million readers, which is big, but it's not over the moon, and close, again, 6 and 7-figure campaigns across our network because those readers are extremely valuable. They're intent driven. They're looking at gear. They're purchasing gear. They're going on trips. So that's maybe the other piece. If you have a niche audience that is of high value, say you look at, whatever, some medical site or something in finance, those audiences are very valuable. And then it might make sense to look at a direct sold type program.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Yeah, I didn't realize the scale of staff you would have to run those on your own, but it sounds, like a lot of work. So you got to make sure that you are capable of handling that workload.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you say direct sold, it could be a $5,000 deal with a local restaurant chain, and you interface with whatever local moms or dads in the area. And they're scrappy direct kind of deals, and those are just ad hoc. They don't set aside budgets and do RFPs. But we found budget in kind of this category of brands that want to reach millions of people in kind of a native contextual environment. They don't, Yeti coolers, their ad can appear on CNN.com next to a story about terrorism, or it can be on Gear Junkie about a story of, 10 great summer hikes or whatever. So it's kind of that proposition of where do you want your ads to be seen? Where do you want your content to be published? Who do you want to interface with? And at what kind of headspace are these people in when you're interfacing with them?
When you're working with these large brands, because you transition perfectly for me, I'm curious, in theory, a programmatic ad in your example on CNN for Yeti would get delivered to someone who has all the characteristics of a Yeti buyer, right? Whatever that looks like, someone who perhaps has been cookied to have interest in those categories, like programmatically, it's being determined that they might be interested. But that's very different than putting the ad in an environment where someone would use that product, like you mentioned, like on Gear Junkie, when someone's thinking about hiking. When you're talking to these big brands, what are their big considerations? What are the things that they're saying they want? And again, I'm just looking for insights for all of us, maybe smaller publishers who don't get the luxury of talking to these brands. We just work with programmatic ads, but I'd love to know, like, what are the things they want when they're looking for placing their ads, and what are the things that they value in terms of metrics?
You really need to define your value proposition to these potential brands or advertisers, and you need to have a moat of some sort. So if they can buy what you sell programmatically or on the platforms, why would they buy with you? They would just go and turn on the levers and click the buttons on Meta or Google or any of the options, or Raptive or the programmatic networks. So what is your value prop? With Gear Junkie, again, it's bigger and better ad units, it's custom content, it's video, it's a high touch relationship with an account manager. You know your ads are being served legitimately to a great audience of people that clicks. So it's determining your value prop before you kind of, you are competing against the biggest companies in human history, i.e. Google, Meta, sometimes Apple. You can't compete against them on what they do best. So what is your moat? What's your value prop? I would challenge people to really narrow in on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Going back to Gear Junkie, in terms of the traffic sources, again, just curious for a site of that size, or at least the size that you were telling that it kind of got to. What were the primary drivers of traffic? Some common ones are different social media channels, Google search, other search platforms, et cetera.
Yeah, we really do focus on SEO, obviously, and that's probably 70 to 80% of our daily traffic. It's someone typing in best hiking boot and landing on our story and getting an objective view on 10 new hiking boots and be able to click through and buy. So that's a big part of the business plan. The revenue strategy is affiliate commerce and SEO. And then the other 20% is viral articles, e-newsletter, social media, direct typing in gearjunkie.com because he saw it somewhere. So we do have a significant amount of direct traffic, but like most content sites, it's weighted toward SEO. It's weighted toward search traffic.
Yep. Yeah. I see that you guys originally were just kind of written content, and then you moved into video. I think it was pretty early on, for the record. I'm going back in the agenda and the timeline here. But what does video look like for Gear Junkie, and how big of a role does video play, or has it developed over time?
We've done kind of everything from lately just Instagram and TikTok shorts to back in the day 20 to 30 minute documentaries that have won awards and gone on film tours. So video has been successful, but maybe not as focused as maybe if I could go back, I think I would pick a lane and really try to own it. So whether that's high gloss production, or it's viral shorts, or it's YouTube and building a host and a personality, we've been kind of all over the place. It's been successful, but I think going ahead, we need to focus. Video is, like anything, you just need to have a playbook and hone in on it. We've kind of done everything, and it's also been such a dynamic space that it's sometimes hard to know where to put the attention. But maybe the one regret is, we should have leaned into YouTube 5 years ago and really tried to build that area. And we also kind of treat video more as a custom product, not necessarily an editorial product, in that we almost always have a sponsor or a partner and have some monetization behind the video. Whereas with our articles, our content, it's an editorial team. We have editors and testers and reporters, and it's more organic and free-flowing.
Hey, just a quick break. I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Just a quick reminder that today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Now, I've got a short clip from Ferry with Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
We got 20 links and placements on massive websites such as The Express, Mirror, Daily Record, and many more, with a campaign about the pros and cons of popular diets. How about? This is exactly how we've done it. Our client is a very popular fitness client. We have asked them to provide thorough expert commentary about the pros and cons of the most popular diets. Once we have this information, we put this in a nice email and send it out to 15,000, yes, 15,000 journalists from around the world that write about fitness. So good. And unhealthy. Big publications picked up our story from the email giving our client massive, juicy, saucy, healthy links that are 100% relevant to their website and that will keep the rankings of the website in a great shape. You see what I've done there? I hope this case study inspires and that you will start leveraging expert community type campaigns to land links to your or your client's website, just like we've done it with this campaign.
Are you looking for similar link building PR campaigns for your website? If so, just go to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them today. Have you guys ever experienced with influencer marketing? I mean, I know I'm an outdoor junkie, so I'm like your avatar, Stephen. And so I know for me, every time I go on Instagram or TikTok, they've got me pegged and I'm getting, all this influencer content about whatever, national parks, hikes, bikes, boats, all canoeing, all that kind of stuff, right? And very popular, right? Like they garner a lot of traffic, a lot of followers. And I've always been curious to see the relationships that brands develop with these influencers. Has that ever been something that you guys have pursued?
Yeah, I think like I said a minute ago, you're picking your lane. What's your value prop? Is it the influencer space? And it's a little bit gray. Gear Junkie is considered an influencer sort of proposition to brands. We have a large social following. We have editors that are the face of the brand, etc. So we do sometimes get bucketed into that influencer category, but it's also a big other thing with individuals with millions of followers. It's sort of that key man proposition. So we lean into that all the time. So whether it's a YouTuber or a set of Instagram influencers that's helping us deliver a campaign, it's one of the levers we pull to just engage with our audience and the new audiences too. So it's one of the kind of mini playbooks that we would run with a campaign.
How would you what are the KPIs when doing something like that? Is it just kind of brand awareness and getting the Gear Junkie brand in front of a lot of people, or do you measure clicks or revenue from individual relationships like that?
Each project's different. We usually have kind of a macro impressions or view kind of goal. Say it's 5. I mean, with the biggest campaigns, it's tens of millions of impressions across the set of deliverables. So maybe one of the influencers delivers 1 million impressions on some series of posts. So usually it rolls up into some bigger sort of macro impression deliverable that makes the campaign more tangible. Kind of found that early on. It's like these big multifaceted campaigns, unless you have kind of this hero metric of like, we're going to reach 100 million people, it just gets hard to communicate. So we leaned into kind of that, like, we're going to deliver 100 million impressions. And if you want to see the breakdown, open up this Excel, and then the project managers make sure that the videos get 50,000 views each, and the influencers each do 6 posts, so we get X amount of impressions, and the banners run across these sites, we get these impressions. And so you can get into the weeds, but having a kind of macro hero number makes it more easy to communicate.
Smart. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Maybe let's fast forward a bit to where you get to the point where you are, for lack of better terms, you go on to sell Gear Junkie, the website, and become part of a much larger network of websites and help them out. Talk us through that process, what you can share, your motivation for doing the deal, what it looked like, just anything you want to talk us through. And what year is this, by the way, when all this happens?
I'd say around 2018, we started to get kind of inbound. We were being poked around, do you want to partner? Let's look into acquisitions. So we went through the dance a couple times and turned down some offers. And then in 2020, this was 2019, we hired an advisor and an M&A attorney, kind of got serious and started to meet with media companies, and found a partner with a startup in LA called Lola Digital. Got to know these guys and came to a deal, and it was a nice exit, and it corresponded exactly with the pandemic crashing down upon the world. It was literally April 2020, chaos, and we did the deal obviously all over Zoom, and just kind of like crazy moment, but got the deal done. Wow. For the first time in 10 years, I was able to lean back a little bit. And that summer was, obviously crazy and just an interesting time, but maybe doubly for me, since I'd sold the company and the staff was now kind of scattered to the wind. And so it was, very like defining moment for me. And then what happened was Lola decided to essentially incentivize me to come back in, get onto the executive staff, and help them build sort of a new iteration of their company. So over 2 years, we raised $40 million. We made 8 acquisitions, and we relaunched the company as All Gear Digital. So it was a wild ride, and they incentivized me with some bonus numbers and some basically dangling carrots to keep me involved. And it was both motivating kind of on a monetary standpoint, but also like I learned a ton. I feel like I got my MBA in business building. And again, we did 8 acquisitions, which was a lot. We pulled in staff from all over the place, built this cohesive network, built kind of the back end, and presented this new company to the audience and to the industry, and have seen some pretty big success.
Congratulations. I mean, to sell a big brand like that is a big deal, but like you said, to do it during that time, I mean, that the whole world was kind of questioning what was happening. My impression of the outdoor space is that since COVID started, it kind of picked up. Was that like a short-term thing that you guys saw, a short-term bump from it, or was it actually a short-term decline because people maybe weren't going outside? Or how did that change the dynamics of just how people interact with the content? I'm talking more on a macro level. Has it changed at all? Because we've had a lot of travel. I say travel. I know you're kind of in travel, but kind of in outdoor space. But travel experienced huge lows and then highs as a result of it. I'm just curious what the correlation was for you guys.
It was a steady growth and maybe even a bubble around 2020, 21, 22, especially parts of the industry like the bike world, like huge demand for bikes in 2021. And people wanted to get outdoors. People were going running again. So it was big. Yeah, it was kind of crazily like the pandemic put fuel on the outdoor fire. And then the other part of it was there has been just kind of a long arc of popular culture leaning more and more into outdoor recreation, wellness, all these things, like the macro trends align with what we're doing. And so the common person now wears like a Gore-Tex jacket walking around Manhattan in Keen hiking boots and a Canada Goose. And so all these brands have become household names and part of mass culture where they used to just be kind of niche culture. So it's been an interesting ride from kind of this scrappy granola industry to now Gorp Core and fashion brands that interface with the Solomons and the North Face of the world.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's great seeing all my friends into the outdoors. I will say it's a bit of a bummer trying to get a campground reservation these days compared to 5 years ago.
Exactly.
Thought that would die off. Really, honestly, hasn't.
Exactly. You got to, especially in California, you got to be on it.
Haven't taken the family to Yosemite since COVID hit.
Nice.
Packed. Yeah. Hey, so you were a part of 8 acquisitions after selling Gear Junkie. I'm just so curious, like, what was the high-level strategy? And again, a lot of people listening buy, sell websites, obviously on a much smaller scale, look to acquire other, sites in their niche as a growth strategy. But from a high level, from a big level, like raising $40 million and then going out and acquiring 8 brands, websites, whatever you want to call it, like, take us through the high-level strategy of why and maybe what you guys were targeting and the reasons behind that.
Sure. The high level was to target content and media sites in the outdoor active landscape that had a long tail, a high domain rank and authority, a brand, and were under monetized. And so that's a pretty common phenomenon in these enthusiast categories where someone builds a lifestyle passion site and they wake up 5 years later and they've got millions of followers and not a wonderful business plan. So we were able to, and some of the sites we've acquired were great businesses. So this doesn't apply to everything, but some of the sites were pretty scrappy. So, we're looking at, these weren't huge acquisitions and we didn't tap into that whole 40 million, but we had that available to us. And many of the acquisitions were 6 and 7 figure acquisitions, and then we were able to bring them into this network and make the business plan more efficient, put them in this advertising network that we built, kind of share back office type services, get better affiliate rates because we have this bigger scale. So kind of all the economy of scale scenarios that media has traditionally leaned into, we looked at that playbook and it launched something new. So All Gear Digital is a collection of 8 outdoor active lifestyle sites, media companies that focus on the outdoors, but also gear. So there's a real tangible connection to product. I think you mentioned Switchback Travel. They're very deep on just world-class product reviews. And the Inertia, it's a surf site. And we just made an acquisition of Pack Hacker, which is all about backpacks and travel. So all the sites, that was a uniting theme also. It's like, it's not just travel and outdoor activities, but there's a product, a gear kind of part of it, which links the audience to more of a commerce situation, which is obviously good for the business plan at a lot of different levels.
You mentioned a few of those sites there, and they seem to, from a high level, be specified in one area, oftentimes of the outdoor space. You got a website that was focused on the biking space, another one that was focused on running, and et cetera. Was the plan always to just buy and operate those sites individually, or was there ever a plan to kind of acquire a brand and roll it into the overall Gear Junkie website or All Gear Digital like platform, I guess?
We looked at that latter scenario for a few acquisitions where there was, say, a site that's kind of been mothballed and it has thousands of pages of content. Can you port that onto Gear Junkie and build a whole archive on fly fishing or another subject matter? Done that to a small scale, but for the most part, these acquisitions, they had brands that were recognized, they had followers on social media and e-news lists, and so didn't want to disrupt that. And a lot of media is just built around its audience and the community that comes from that. So for the most part, kept things, it really didn't really rock the boat. With these acquisitions, we bring on the whole team, keep the editors, kind of keep the ship just moving on the same path, but then put some fuel on the fire to build the business plan.
In the case with these 8 businesses, did the founders stay on? Did the staff stay on? I mean, you kind of alluded to the fact that they did, but at the same time, you kind of consolidated a bit. I'm just curious what that transition would look like if you were a founder, if you were a writer, if you were a content creator.
Yeah, all the founders stayed on for at least a year. Some have now gone on to new phases. Some are still with us. So it's we did make a friendly transition that was win-win. Media is such a human game too that you can't just come in and tear things apart and expect the same results. So the proposition is really, we'll acquire your site and then we'll help you build your baby to its next level, which is what we've done with many of these properties.
Transitioning into now what you're doing with the company and helping with the media buying, and tell me if I have that mischaracterized, but as you're doing that, is that across all the brands or is that usually individually focused on one brand? I'm just curious now how you work across 8 sites and what brands think about that.
We do sell this All Gear network as kind of our macro media buy scenario where you can engage with 10 million plus readers a month. And so, I work with Kyle Nosselman, who's VP of Sales. He's someone I hired and groomed and built to a leadership position over the last 8 years. And his team and myself essentially work on these big partnerships and direct sold deals. We're today working on a mid 6-figure RFP that we're going to submit to a big running shoe brand. So still in the weeds with the decks and the Excel, and it's a process. And so that's my involvement. I'm an advisor with Gear Junkie and All Gear, and put in some hours a week to kind of work on these high level deals.
When it comes to direct sales, would you ever also run programmatic advertising on these websites, or is it just the experience is completely controlled by the fact that you have direct sales to brands. I'm just curious if there's an avenue for someone to consider doing both.
Yeah, we do both. We certainly have the pipes to serve programmatically because some of the bigger advertisers only want to serve that way. So it's then going to be a minimum kind of CPM impression level to serve the ad or whatever the serving scenario is set up as. So we certainly have the pipes to serve programmatically, and then we also manage our own proprietary ad servers.
I know you're not on the day-to-day, traffic generation side of things where you're trying to get SEO growth or growth in social media, but from a high level, being someone who sits at a high level at this organization that runs kind of 8 independent content, websites, like how have the strategies changed since 2020? Obviously Google has changed dramatically. AI has come into the fold. Different mediums have become more and less popular. From a high level, like how has that changed and how have you guys adapted your approach and where are you guys maybe focused on now that's a little different than even 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, weirdly, it hasn't changed a ton. We have editors that get up every day, look at email, read press releases, collaborate, build great content, publish it, post it on social, do a newsletter. We have SEO people, etc. So on a macro, it's not like our big processes have changed. On more of a like micro and day-to-day, yeah, we lean into all the AI tools, whether that's generating graphics on Midjourney or headline ideation on ChatGPT, or simply like using different WordPress plugins and things that become available. So I think it's you gotta lean into these new technologies, but don't chase the shiny objects too hard because you can get off track. And I was talking to my editorial director yesterday, Sean McCoy, who's a longtime friend and collaborator, and we were just looking at some analytics, and he kind of made a comment about how it's just this swirl of data, and he certainly gets insight, but he feels like after doing this for 15 years, it's just like his gut that tells him what to do day to day to day. And so it kind of goes back to being a journalist, being an editorial person, understanding, having empathy for the reader at all stages. With every single word, every piece you're putting out there, it's like you're writing for somebody who wants to read this and engage with it and share it. So at a top level, that kind of ethos hasn't changed, but certainly we try to lean into any new tool that can make us more efficient.
Right. Whatever you're comfortable sharing, but give people an idea, like now that you've rolled up 8 brands and, obviously pandemics happen and come and gone, and like, where are you at now, whether it's page views or whether it's, revenue figures, or like, where is this conglomerate at this point?
Yeah, I think we say 10 million readers a month are the kind of the round numbers with all gear, and it's a really quality reader. Again, it's the dwell time on some of these sites, the time on page is 6 or 8 minutes, so it's an extremely engaged audience of people, and they're looking at ad campaigns or they're clicking through to buy gear on an REI or a backcountry.com. So that's kind of on the audience level. I mean, all these sites are doing, 5, 6, sometimes 7-figure ad deals. We're converting hundreds of thousands. We're initiating hundreds of thousands of clicks per month to our retail partners. So the scale is big, but it's also not, outdoors is still a niche. So it's not hundreds of millions. It's tens of millions is kind of the category we play in.
This is a really open-ended question, but I just thought I'd throw it your way. For the small publisher listening to this, the single site, single operator, what is something that you could share with them, some piece of insight that they wouldn't be able to get from running a small website that you would be able to share with them from running, 8 brands, right? 8 websites. Like what's something that small publishers tend to miss right now?
I think you just got to get up every day and figure out what you can add to the conversation and how you can break through the noise. And so it's not about checking the boxes for, I guess I should say, the table stakes are like world-class SEO, world-class content, and kind of a platform that is able to reach a large audience. That's table stakes. If you're not there, and by world-class, I mean like there's industry standard playbooks or all of that. So you got to get there. And then once you kind of have that foundational structure, you need to then, how do we break through the noise? So in our category, outdoor, for example, it's really like a huge UGC category. You think of all the Instagrammers and YouTubers who just do this for fun. That's a huge competition, right? So how do you produce videos or content that's better than a professional skier or a whitewater guide has a GoPro strapped on? So it's figuring out how to kind of level up and be kind of that unique voice, because the internet is such a crowded space. So that's maybe one thing, like just finding your unique voice and your value prop within this noisy space.
Yeah, it's great. It's great advice. I mean, like you said, there's been a million photos of, a Yosemite sunset or insert your outdoor, trope wherever you want, but having your unique take on it, no one else has had that yet. Hey, so as we wrap up, what's next for Lola, for All Gear Digital, for these websites? What's next for you? Like, I'm curious what you guys see on the horizon and what you're pursuing.
Yeah, we are still acquisitive, so we're looking at some deals, and we'll probably continue to grow via acquisition, and then also just organically with our staff and our contractors. So that's the playbook, is essentially to steadily grow this thing. And maybe that's a point. Like, there's been so much chaos in media, and some of these big ZERP era venture funded media companies, the Vice and Voxes of the world, they got huge and they imploded, the BuzzFeed. So something like All Gear is obviously in a little smaller of an echelon, but we've been smart. We've just taken a somewhat conservative path to growth, but also putting money toward growth where it makes sense, and hopefully seeing the results. So that's the plan, kind of continue on with the growth, and hopefully 2024 treats us well. So far it's been a good year despite kind of the craziness in the macro environment of media, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, very good. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us, Stephen. Where can people kind of follow along with what you have going on, or connect with you if they need to?
Yeah, gearjunkie.com. I'm still, very active, more on the business side. I occasionally write a story, so follow me there. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and kind of all the socials. Great.
We'll get some of that in the show notes as well. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the Niche Pursuits podcast. Good luck with what's next. It was really, it was very insightful to learn all about not only your backstory and how you started, Gear Junkie, but also just what you guys are involved in right now. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, Jared, thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Just a final reminder that it was brought to you by Search Intelligence. And if you're looking for link building PR campaigns for your website, just head over to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them today. Cheers.